All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. We've got a really fascinating one today.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
This is, you guys sent in some stuff about a single verse from the Old Testament. Just one.
That's all it takes sometimes.
Hosea chapter 3, verse 2. But wow, does it pack a punch?
Yeah, it's surprising how much is packed into these verses, these little snippets. They're just a wellspring of meaning and depth when you really start to unpack them.
So we're talking love, faithfulness, what it means to be valued, maybe even more importantly, loved, beyond measure, kind of regardless of what you bring to the table. So yeah, today, deep dive mission is to get into this passage, unpack it, explore this intense symbolism. And it really does use this imagery of a relationship like a marriage to kind of illustrate these bigger ideas. And thankfully, you guys sent in some really great excerpts that laser in on this Hosea 3.2. Let's jump in. So first things first, who are these people? Hosea, Gomer, set the scene for us.
Right. Okay, so the sources paint Hosea as a prophet, a messenger of God, if you will, and Gomer is his wife. But and here's where it gets interesting. Right off the bat, their marriage was, let's just say, a little complicated. Gomer, she was engaging in prostitution before and during her marriage to Hosea.
Wow. Not exactly a picture of marital bliss.
No, not quite. And this wasn't just some personal drama for Hosea. This was, according to the sources anyway, it was orchestrated by God. It was like a living parable playing out to show God's relationship with Israel, his chosen people, because you see, they were constantly breaking their covenant with God, going after other gods, which basically amounts to spiritual adultery. So you can kind of see where this is going.
Oh, yeah. It sets the stage for this verse we're looking at, Hosea 3.2. So what happens? What does Hosea do?
Okay, so picture this. Gomer, she's back to her old ways. And God, he tells Hosea to buy her back. He gathered what he could, paying with silver and barley to secure her freedom. No ifs, ands, or buts, just go get her. I can only imagine what must have been going through Hosea's head. Talk about a test of faith.
Intent. And it's so symbolic, right? Like the sources are all over this. It's this beautiful and a little bit messed up picture of God's unwavering love, his commitment to redeeming his people. Doesn't matter how many times they screw up. Doesn't matter what Gomer did. Hosea, following God's lead, brings her back. What a statement.
Right. I mean, it kind of flips the script on what we think love and commitment should look like. It's like God saying, my love isn't a prize you win. It's not a reward for good behavior. It's just there, always, like a constant force, even when we're totally off track. It's interesting, too, the material mentions Hosea's financial situation. Profits, they weren't exactly rolling in dough, but he scrapes together whatever he can, silver, barley, just to do what God asked. Talk about obedience.
Yeah, and that really highlights the cost involved, even if the amount wasn't huge in itself.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads to another question, and one the excerpts bring up. What was Gomer's standing in society at this point? I mean, we're talking about a woman who had been a prostitute before marriage, after marriage. Her reputation couldn't have been great. What kind of value would she even have in their culture?
Yeah, the sources are pretty blunt about that. Socially, Gomer was, let's be honest, damaged goods. Her choices, they would have tanked her worth in the eyes of the community, especially compared to, women who hadn't gone down that path. It's kind of a stark reality check, right?
Totally. So you've got Hosea, not exactly a wealthy guy, paying to buy back his wife who, from the world's perspective, doesn't have much value left.
Yeah.
And the price itself, as the sources mentioned, it was 15 shekels of silver and some barley. Not exactly breaking the bank. It's not about her market value. That's the point, isn't it?
That's the key. This whole transaction wasn't about Gomer's worth in some kind of economic sense. It was about Hosea's love, his love for her, even when it didn't make sense, and his obedience to God. And this is where it gets really profound. This is where the rubber meets the road for us. God doesn't redeem us because we are valuable or because we deserve it. He redeems us because, and I think the sources all agree on this, because he loves us, period, unconditionally. Our worth, in God's eyes, it's not about what we achieve or our social status. It comes from his choice to love us.
It's almost mind-blowing, isn't it? It goes against everything we're kind of taught to believe about worth and value.
Totally. It's radical.
So this whole act, Hosea redeeming Gomer, becomes this huge symbol. As the sources explain, Gomer's unfaithfulness, it's like a mirror to our own tendency to stray from God. Like ancient Israel, we turn away. We go after what the material calls spiritual idolatry. I mean, that really makes you think, what are our modern-day Baals? What are the things we put before God in our lives?
Right. Like Gomer broke her covenant with Hosea. We break our connection with God through sin, through making bad choices, choosing stuff that ultimately doesn't fulfill us. It's like back then it was these literal idols like Baal. But what about now? Is it money, status, pleasure? Putting those things above our relationship with God, that's a form of spiritual adultery. It's a powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah. But thankfully, the story doesn't end there. Even when we mess up, God, like Hosea, he takes the initiative. He redeems. He
Right.
restores. And the price he paid, that's where the contrast gets really stark. Hosea, he gathered silver and barley. God, he gave something way, way more precious.
Exactly. The sources really drive this point home. God gave his son, Jesus Christ, as the ultimate ransom. That's love in action, a sacrifice that shows the incredible depth of his grace. And this redemption, this thing we get through Christ, that's priceless. You can't put a dollar value on that. It makes what Hosea did seem, almost like a faint echo of this ultimate act of love.
Which brings us back to this idea of our own unworthiness. The excerpts even quote 1 Corinthians 1.26. Quote, "Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth." Doesn't exactly paint us as, prize-winning specimens.
It's humbling, right? From the world's perspective, we often don't measure up. And the sources, they're pretty clear about this too. From a spiritual standpoint, we're all sinners. We fall short of God's glory. We deserve judgment, not grace. But here's the thing. It's not about beating ourselves up. It's about understanding how amazing God's love is. He chooses to redeem us anyway.
So just to make sure we're all on the same page here, the motivation for this whole redemption thing, it's not something we did. It's not like we earned it. It's God's love, pure and simple. Like Hosea, he ransomed Gomer even though she was unfaithful. God, he ransomed us through Christ's sacrifice, not because we deserved it. Because his love, it's just that powerful. It drives him to seek us out, to want a relationship with us. And the excerpts you shared, they make this really interesting point about us as Christians. We're chosen, like in a marriage covenant, to be with Christ. But, and here's the catch, just like Gomer, we stray, we mess up, we turn away. We commit what they call spiritual adultery again and again through our choices, through the things we prioritize. Yeah. This is a sobering thought, isn't it?
Yeah, no kidding. But the good news is there's this theme of restoration that keeps coming up in the material. Like Gomer going back to Hosea, that was a picture of being restored. And in the same way, accepting Christ's sacrifice, that puts us back in a right relationship with God. Even after we've wandered off, he's always there, offering us a way back. It's like a standing invitation.
That's comforting. And the crazy thing is, this restoration, it's not just about us cleaning up our act, trying to be good enough on our own. It's about this covenant, this unbreakable bond that God establishes with us. Just like Gomer, she wasn't welcomed back because she suddenly became perfect. It was because of the existing bond, the marriage covenant.
Yeah. It's a beautiful picture of grace. Our salvation, sources are clear about this. It's not a reward for good behavior. It's a gift. It's based on God's faithfulness, his unwavering promises, not on our ability to be perfect. It takes the pressure off,
Yeah.
and it puts the focus where it should be on God's character, his commitment to the relationship.
It really is all about him, isn't it? That's the core message. At least that's what shines through from these sources. God's character, it's unchanging. Even when we turn away, he's waiting, ready to welcome us back. It's a love that's unstoppable, relentless. It hunts us down even when we're in full-on rebellion mode. Amazing.
Absolutely. It's like Hosea went after Gomer. He paid the price to bring her back. God, he goes even further. He spares nothing, literally gives everything to bring us home. It's a love that's so deep, so costly, it completely redefines our relationship with him.
So there you have it.
Yeah.
Hosea 3.2. A tiny verse, but man, it explodes with meaning. This incredible picture of a love that sees past our flaws, a redemption that's totally free, and a worth that's bestowed on us, not something we have to earn. I don't know about you, but it makes me rethink how I see myself, how I see others.
Totally. Like if God values us not based on what we do or what we achieve, then what does it even mean to be loved like that? What does that say about how we should treat ourselves and how we should treat each other? It's a question worth pondering.
Yeah, it's a game changer. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Hosea 3.2. We've unpacked a lot today. We've seen how Hosea and Gomer's story gives us this powerful way to understand what redemption really means. We've talked about God's love as the driving force behind it all, a love that's not deterred by our, let's face it, less than stellar track record. And we've touched on the immense cost of that love, the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus. As you go about your day, maybe think about this. If our worth isn't based on what we accomplish or our status, then what does it mean to be loved like that? How does that change how we see ourselves and others?
It's a big question. And if this whole thing has sparked your curiosity, I'd really encourage you to, dive into the book of Hosea yourself. Explore this idea of redemption. It's a theme that runs through scripture and honestly through a lot of spiritual traditions. There's always something new to discover, something to make you think.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking.
And keep those questions coming.
See you next time.